Let's talk education. And on today's talk, we're sharing about the practical use of assessments. Student understanding is typically reflected in the learner's ability to explain a process or concept, to answer or further elaborate beyond facts, to demonstrate and explain, as well as to ask further probing questions. Now, according to two well-known authors in education, Wiggins and McTighe, good assessments provide variation of assessment during the course of any given term. Now, these assessments, when we talk about variations, are referring to diagnostic, formative, and summative assessments. What do these terms mean? Now, diagnostic assessments are those assessments or testings that take place at the start of a period or the start of a term. So, for instance, parents, you would find that when a child is entering a new institution, many institutes would ask for a diagnostic assessment to be done. Reason being, we want to be able to check to determine the extent to which the student has knowledge in content areas as to the grade level that they're supposed to be at. And we also want to be able to determine the extent to which the student is able to demonstrate skills in terms of interpretation and application. How well can the student use the information, understand the information, utilize the information in new scenarios, diagnostic assessments. So this helps us to be able to learn how we could take things further and be able to well support the child. So for instance, at SRC Private Primary, the results from the diagnostic assessment is used for the development of individual education plans. So that way each student in each class has an outline that says this is where the student is at, these are the areas in which the student has performed, and this is the type of support that we've determined that the student needs. Yes? Now, formative assessments I mentioned a moment ago. Formative assessments are those assessments that takes place during the course of the term. In typical schools, formative assessments take the form of, let's say, weekly tests or sometimes projects or case studies, because we want to know how well are you understanding as you go along. So that if it is you have a challenge or you're not able to utilize the information as the educator in the classroom, we're able to make decisions that say, listen, these are the challenges, so these are the instructional strategies we would now use in order to further support the student. And summative assessments are those that take place at the end of a period. In some cases, it could represent an end of term exam. In other cases, it could be represented by other major exams such as the Caribbean examinations, council exams, or the SEA exam. And summative assessment really gives students the opportunity at the end of their course of study to demonstrate how well they have learned, how well they understand. Now, parents, I want to encourage you, when you start thinking of assessments, don't be nervous. Assessments are not a doom and gloom experience, but assessments, when we really think about it, should be an opportunity to celebrate. Why? We're celebrating because the student has the opportunity to showcase what he or she knows, and more importantly, where there are challenges. The results from the assessment help the teacher, the principal, the school administration to come together and to determine what is needed to best support the child. Now, as I mentioned, an easy way to understand it would be to, even if we look at the SRC model, where assessment data is relied on heavily as a tool to inform instruction. What does this mean? Assessment data, meaning the results from the test, is what the educators use to inform instruction. And informing instruction means we use this information to tell us what we'll teach in conjunction with the curriculum outline, when we'll teach it, and how we'll teach it, all being tailored to the child. Upon admission to the school at SRC, all new students are required to undergo diagnostic assessments. And I'm sure for so many in other institutions, the process would be the same. For students returning from the previous term, of course, we're usually able to utilize the assessment results from the previous term. But why do you, the parent, need to know about this? Because as I mentioned, when we have the information, it means that from the educator's point of view, the most appropriate instructional strategies can be applied. And of course, we're reminding you when we talk about instructional strategies, we're talking about the how that we teach. What are the strategies we use to relay the information and help students to understand the content or the information that is being utilized in the classroom? Of course, this too helps to determine the need for accommodations or modifications in the classroom environment. What are these? Accommodations are the adjustments we make within the learning experience that help tailor the learning experience to the student so the student can better understand. So, sometimes you might have a general classroom and Miss or Sir would come to the class and teach as a whole group experience. But then there might be one child that has a particular need that, hey, if we used diagrams and visual aids, this student would better understand. So we make an accommodation. Yes? And sometimes we need modifications because maybe a child might be having problem with their eyesight. So that child might need to sit closer to the classroom board. Or maybe a child might be diagnosed with a special need, and particular arrangements might be needed in the classroom environment. Even in the process of consultation and assessment, we're able to determine how, to what extent is this needed and be able to accommodate and support the student. So again, mummies and daddies, assessments are not the enemy. Assessments are great tools in empowering teachers to support your child. And of course, these assessments help determine the need for student skills training as a complement to their development. Because remember, it's not only about the content, it's not only about the information as it pertains to math, but sometimes there are other skills that are needed, like skills as it pertains to learning and memorizing, being able to work with the information. So there are many other skills that are needed to support learner development, and we want to support this. So we want to remind you parents, it's important to become collaborators in the process of assessment because we understand that tests are not mechanisms for punishment, but rather they're opportunities to display knowledge, and they help the teachers to know how to better support based on the quality of work demonstrated when we submit the test responses. And of course, this understanding is further reinforced as students are included when academic reviews are done. What are academic reviews? Academic reviews are those meetings that we have when we call the parent in and we include the student to discuss the findings of the test. So the teacher, the student, and the parent are all important contributors in the academic development when everybody's voice is heard and respected. Yes? So ultimately, what we want to do is we want to ensure that student needs are met collectively and individually so we could increase the structure and the way we use resources, the way we modify the content so that learners' needs can be accommodated and met. So even as we wrap up this education chat, I want to remind us all that student support is a collaborative effort among teachers, students, parents, and school administration. We all must come together, and assessments play an important role in equipping teachers to adjust instruction so that the student could be best supported within the inclusive environment. So, even as we wrap up this episode of Let's Talk Education, I hope that the information shared today gives you a better understanding of why assessments are important, the types of assessments you can expect in your school environment, and why we should not be afraid of assessment, but we should embrace it because it helps us to better support the child.